it has just gone past 9 o'clock, and I would like us to start the meeting of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament. Let me make use of the opportunity to welcome all of you who has come to attend, and also extend a word of welcome also to Casidra and also to everybody who's at the meeting. Before we may start, can I just get an indication of honorable members who are present?
Good morning, Chair. My name is Derek America. I'm a member of the committee. Thank you.
Thanks, honorable member.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Matlodi Maseko, member of the Standing Committee.
Deirdre Bartman, member of the committee.
Thanks.
Pat Moran, not a member of this committee.
Thank you. I think then Mr. David, are there any indications of apologies?
Yes, good morning, Chairperson. Good morning, members. Chairperson, I've just received an apology from Minister Meyer. He will not be able to attend. And 5 minutes ago, I received an apology from Member Klego's office. He also will not be able to attend, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Mr. David. Now, honorable members, as you know, the meeting is for purposes of looking at the report of Casidra, as it was one of our standing resolution that it would like them to actually brief us in terms of addressing the challenges that they have here. And I think we do have the delegation with us. Before we start, I would also like to indicate that this meeting is held in terms of the rules of standing rules of the Provincial Parliament as amended in order to deal with the virtual meeting as well. This is a virtual meeting of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts. Now, I think what I'm going to do then, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to hand over to Casidra. They introduce their delegation, and thereafter make the presentation, and then we'll take it from there.
Good morning, Chairperson and SCOPA members. It's Stuart Samington here, CEO of Casidra. With me today are my colleagues, Mr. Fred Provincial, who is the Chief Financial Officer, and Mr. David Neff on the far right, who's Chief Officer Projects. Thank you for your time this morning. We've got a presentation we'd like to put up and just go through, and then field any questions, if that's in order with you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Right, the first issue that was tabled was around Programme 3, the Rural Infrastructure and Poverty Alleviation Programme, and it was about concerning the number of projects implemented from previous financial years. What the Casidra did is we estimated 36 projects for that year. We thought we had done 50, but the AG differed with us that we'd only done 43. Although this was 7 more than we projected to do, it was 7 less than what we thought we had done. This was basically around the timing of when the project starts. We have always taken the start date to be the funding date, but the AG felt that it was more appropriate that we pick the memorandum of agreement date, the date on which we signed the program with the beneficiaries. This, of course, and then after you've got a funding date, then comes your implementation or your memorandum of agreement date, and then finally your completion date of the project, and they can fall into different years. So now that we know what the starting date is, we're having to adjust our systems to make sure that we can allocate projects in the correct years. And the measures we've taken are to put additional layers of control ensure that completed projects are correctly allocated to the specific years based on the starting point being the MOA. And then we've also ensured that compliance officers and their assigned project managers check and approve performance information on a quarterly basis. So we're not only doing it in years time frame, we're also doing it in layers in the organization to make sure the allocations of the projects for a particular year are correct. The original manager responsible did resign, and we used the opportunity to elevate the oversight role to the chief officer of projects, just to make sure that this was corrected. So that was the first issue you asked us to look at. The second issue was number 24 in the annual report. It surrounded procurement and contract management. Some of the quotations were awarded to bidders based on preference points not allocated in accordance with the PFA requirements. Disappointingly, despite the training given, mistakes were made, especially on the allocation, depending on the level of status. Certain points were supposed to be allocated, which didn't happen. We had to have disciplinary action on the person. It was really one individual more than a collective error, and that led, unfortunately, to the employee's dismissal. We advertised the post and filled it, and then on top of that, we put a bid Kaizen team, which is really a bid technical team in place with a supply chain officer at the helm there to make sure that the documents were correctly evaluated. And fortunately, there was no recurrence of this in the more recent audit. So we're happy we've repaired that, but we're watching it closely. And then the third and final procurement contract management was on a similar basis, where quotations were awarded to bidders that did not score the highest points. If one has to check very carefully that you're dealing with a certified copy of the original BBBEE certificate. You can't just work from a photocopy. And one also has to check very carefully that the expiry dates of the BBBEE certificates are checked very carefully. Otherwise, you can land up awarding points to a company whose certificate has lapsed. In that case as well, the measures we took were basically to put a standing operation procedure manual in place. I've had a look at it, and it's comprehensive, and it has, in my view, successfully addressed the matter, because in our recent audit, there were no recurrence of such findings. So, Chairperson, those are the three areas you requested us to look at, and we leave it to you now to ask for any clarification should you need. And back to you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Symington. There you've got it, honorable members. Can I get an indications of members who would like to ask questions? I see Honorable Maseko, Honorable America, in that order.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. And again, thanks for Casidra for today coming with a presentation. We really appreciate that. Chair, without wasting any time, I just want to find out the reporting systems in the past financial years. How were you doing it that now it was different to the AG, that they had to have these findings that you reported before the date of the implementation, if I understood you correctly so. And another one, it will be the process. I want to understand the process of awarding to the bidders. Does it depend on one person in Casidra in the office, or they are some few people that have to go through the paperwork to make sure that the correct steps are being taken? Because I see here you say the employee that was involved, not employees. So the dependency for doing the right thing or doing check and balances is on one person and not a team that has to make sure the every paperwork had a check and balances. I understand now you got to do something different, but then for the person that has been dismissed, is it was the whole cathedral dependent on her for that? And the last one, chairperson. Wait, I lost the other one. You know, I'm okay with the other one. If I can get the answer, I'll do the follow-up after that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Honorable America.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if I'm going to repeat one of the questions that my colleague has posed, but allow me to express my gratitude towards Cressida for having addressed the issues highlighted by the AG's report. So my question basically evolves around the adjustment of the starting dates of the infrastructure and rural infrastructure and poverty relief projects. So given the change in starting dates, Chair, would it have a significant impact on the number of projects that would be assisted or during a particular financial year, i.e., what would it affect the outcomes of the projects that will be identified and assisted? Will we see a reduction, or will it be within the capabilities of the presently defining capabilities of CASIDRA? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable America. Honorable Ngonzo.
Thank you, Chairperson. I think I'm partially covered by Member Maseko. I think particularly on this question, but I'm interested to know the person that has been dismissed. What was the charge of the dismissal? Is it related to this issue of inability, or taking up certificates that were not certified? If you can just clarify me more on that. The second one in that is that given this is a procurement function, aligned to what Member Maseko was asking, what is the staff complement of the procurement unit of CASIDRA? Who is the final signatory, and including what is the role of the CFO and the CEO in the final approval of any of such related transactions where these kind of issues would have been checklisted. Then the other one, Chair, is that as it relates to the other matter about the number of projects and how you consider from an AG's point of view, like the starting dates and all of these, can CASIDRA indicate at this point, if we look at the maybe this current financial year that we are in, is there a new system that has been introduced in terms of how they report their projects so that the kind of situation does not happen? If so, what kind of a system that had to be introduced, to sort of ensure that they meet up what the AG's requirements are? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Maran.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Chair, and good mornings to everyone. Chair, I just wanted to check, and some issues seems to be covered. The first one, and the different starting dates when it comes to those poverty elevation projects. The target was 36. the Casidra thought it was 50, and then the AG said, no, it's not 50, it's 43. And the question that the Honorable America posed is whether the target dates impact on the number, on whether the 7 basically falls within another financial year, not the current one that's been reported on. I wanted to check, Chair, whether Casidra, do they agree, if for instance the starting dates did not impact, do they agree with the AG that only 43 projects were done? And if so, how much money was spent? What the money was spent, was it on 50 projects, but the outcome is only 43? I just want to understand, because in their minds, they thought it's 50, meaning they have spent money for 50 projects, but the outcome was only 43, according to the AG. I just wanted to check whether money for 50 projects has been spent, although it's only 43. The second one, Chair, and I also wanted to check one person, and the presenter was saying, for instance, that it's one individual being charged, dismissed, whether there's no checks and balances, for instance. I don't understand. And then the third one, Chair, besides the fact that the bidders basically we're not scoring the highest points because of certificates, Chair, that have lapsed. But besides that fact, how do you make a payment? How do you make a payment if the certificates were not were lapsed? When it comes, for instance, to Chair, the bidding process and allocated a specific project to a bidder, that's one thing. The payment, how do you make a payment of all those supposed to be the needed documents were not all basically intact? How do you make a payment? Thanks.
Thank you very much, Honorable Maran. I will allow Casidra to respond to question. I know Honorable Maseko said that maybe if his question comes back, he will, but what I'll do in the meantime, I will allow Casidra to respond to the question that have been asked. But just before that I do that, I just wanted to check, maybe just it's for governance issues really, that I want maybe Casidra to respond on this. Now, I think it's the third time in this year now since our last meeting we had with Casidra, and the resolution was sent to them as to what they need to respond on. On the first meeting when you were with the Department of Agriculture, we did ask you, where is your report? You said you did not know that you were supposed to present the report, whereas the resolution was sent to you. Then on the following meeting, when we had you as together with other departments, now you were not with the Department of Agriculture, because we said we would like you to come, and then you gave us half a page, a report. And in that half a page was really not talking to the resolution that was sent to you. Then we said you must come here now today, which we are here, which we are fine with that. Then there was a document you've presented to us, which I don't think is the one you are presenting here now. I just wanted to check whether since last week up until now, what might have changed that you actually ended up giving us this document, which is different from the one you were presenting, where we actually stop you to say, look, you must rather go and have time to deal with that. Those are just some of the questions that I will, just for governance purposes, really, I wanted to respond. Thanks, thanks, Mr. Symington.
Thank you, Chairperson. Just on the governance matters, we did submit a report on our BBBEE status to the Department of Agriculture that was requested of us. So we did give it to Mr. Floris Heysama there and acknowledged receipt of it. The second issue about submitting a half-pager, it was a financial reconciliation that was requested when you sent us the documents for the last week. One of the requests that was in the parliamentary report of April the 23rd, I think it was, requested a reconciliation from us. It wasn't in your letter, but your letter referred to that document, and then we submitted that as part of the presentation. And the third issue, the reason this differs from the last PowerPoint presentation we had for you was simply that we didn't understand clearly, or I didn't understand clearly from your letter, that you were requiring what the AG's report. I was working from a management report on some internal matters that were being discussed. But this, I spoke to the AG after our last meeting, and he said that it would be more relevant for us to submit the issue, the material misstatements in the AG report. So that's why it differs. And I did ask for clarification from Mr. Dustin Davids that he could indicate to us very clearly in the letter for this week and today's presentation what was required. We really appreciate that, and he did that. So I really appreciate his quick response for the detail that you required today. So that's the governance from my side, Chairperson. Do you want any further clarification on that?
No, thank you very much. Thank you very much,
Okay.
Mr. Smith.
Pleasure. Just from the detail of how the division works, I'm going to ask my colleague, Mr. Neft, who's Chief Officer Projects, under whom that part of the business falls, and the CFO, if he wants to contribute to refining the answers to the responses to the answers. I'll ask Mr. Neft to help us out here. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's a pleasure then to respond to the questions asked by the honourable members. So the first one was from Honourable Maseko around past practices as it relates to specifically project start dates. Now, so past practices and how the general understanding is that a project starts when we sign the MOA with the beneficiary. So that we agree. But often there is projects, we get projects where we need to deliver, but not to a beneficiary, but say to the Department of Agriculture, say fencing material to Beaufort West, and then there's no direct beneficiary. And I think that's where the discrepancy came in. So where we haven't had a direct beneficiary, we then assume we use the starting date as the date when the funding flows. And therefore it was then assumed to be a previous year project. And so what we agreed with the AG now is if we don't have a direct beneficiary that signs, that we use the first date when we contract with a supplier. Now that understanding then meant that some of that 50 became 43, 7 less if we take that understanding from the AG side. So the second question from Honourable America, starting date impact, the impact of the effects of that. So what the reason why we have delayed projects or projects that doesn't complete in the year that the funding flows. So oftentimes when we get projects, there's still some planning that needs to happen in the context of that project. And so that planning takes time. Sometimes if it's like in agriculture, seasonal project where the planting season has lapsed and we need to wait for another year, that can be the reason for the delay. So the answer is no. So it doesn't impact the fact that the starting date is a year later. So the project still gets completed. It's then just reported under previous year projects, like in this case. Honourable Kondo, the new system. So we've agreed with the AG that we will use framework agreements with suppliers then as the evidence if we don't have a beneficiary MOA. So I think now we've got a common understanding on that one, so that we, as we move forward, we look at the same things when we consider whether a project is a previous year project. Honourable Marang referred to the 50 versus 43, and was the money spent? Yes, the money was spent. So this is just reported under another target then. So we've got two basic targets in terms of projects. So the one target refers to when we sign the MOA, and the other one refers to when we complete a project. So, in this case, it will be captured under another target as we, if it's not captured under this specific previous year project target. So that's the four honourable members that had questions, and that is basically my response. Thank you, Chair.
If I got Mr. Left, if I got the Honourable Maran's question was that, was the money spent on 50 or on 43?
It was spent on 50, it does not reported. The 43 refers to what can be reported under that specific indicator. So yes, the money was definitely spent on 50 projects, definitely.
I don't know, Mr. Symington, who's going to respond, because the questions, there were some I think were not answered. For example, there was the question on the dismissal charge.
Yes.
What was the person who was dismissed charged on, and also the issue of the staff complement, as well as the role of the CEO and the CFO. I think on procurement procedure and the role of, I think that question was asked by Honourable Ngondlo.
So thank you, Chair. I will ask our CFO, under whom procurement falls, to give us the detail on that for you and the team.
Thank you, Chairperson. We've got one procurement administrator, the person who is collecting the data and who must make sure that the documents are on file. After that approval, but there are different project managers, and we can say for instance, 5 to 10 project managers who are submitting to him, who must ensure that the correct procedures and everything have been followed and put on file. From that, there's a summary going to a management committee for consideration and for approval. And in the final end, it's a management decision where the transaction had been approved. But in the background, if, for instance, you put a copy of a document on file, it will not always be picked up, for instance, by management. He's charged, there were actually 2 charges against him. He first got a final written warning, and then a month or 2 thereafter, there was a dismissal. And in both instances, he took us to the CCMA, and in both cases, the CCMA ruled in favor of the company. Yes, there are complete procedures that should have been followed by that person, and unfortunately, the rules have not been adhered to. Like the CEO mentioned, that after the dismissal, a new person, the post had been advertised and it had been filled subsequently. And there was no reoccurrence of these happenings in the current financial year. The problem, for instance, with BE certificates is that in some instances, a regional, well, you cannot get in a regional, everything is a copy. Now, but that copy must be certified by a commissioner of oaths. And in some instances, it was a copy, the certification was a copy of the certification and not the original signature of the commissioner on the document. That was some of the other things that was picked up, and that is what we've corrected by means of a standard operating procedure to inform everybody who is working with that to get them up to standard with everything. Total staff component of Casidra is around about 50, and I numbers of times said Casidra is too small to be big and too big to be small, meaning that we must play according to the rules, although we do not have the luxury of a team assisting in every event. So in some of the instances, it boils down to one individual. I'm not quite sure whether there are any other matters that have been outstanding that I have not covered yet.
I think, Chair, there was a question as to whether we agreed with the AG in terms of taking the MOA as a date rather than the funding date. And I think practically what happens in our business is that because of agriculture being very seasonal, sometimes you can miss the cycles. Sometimes you have electricity and water challenges, and the funding can flow, but there's a considerable delay between the date the fundings come and the date you actually have to sign an MOA with the beneficiary. This considerable amount of time can lapse, often for circumstances beyond your control. So we think it is a fairer date, and having weighed up the arguments from both sides, it's a fairer date. So that's where we're putting the peg in the ground for the start date on the MOA.
Thank you. I see I take it there are follow-up questions from Honorable Nkondlo, Honorable Maseko, and Honorable Maran. Can we do it in that order, honorable members? Honorable Nkondlo.
Thank you, Chair. I really want the CFO to really educate me on this answer that he has provided. One, he says the person, there's one person who is responsible for the admin, and this person would report to various project managers. I do not know what that means, various project managers. How many are those in terms of number? Because he has indicated that there are 50, but he's not indicating how many people are in the procurement function, which I understand that him as a CFO is the last person in that chain, as the CEO has indicated that the function is in the CFO. So I'm interested to understand in terms of the hierarchy of that function, how many people are in there. And secondly, in terms of delegations, because my assumption in what he's giving is that the person that was dismissed is an administrator, and his or her role was to ensure that the paperwork that then the management committee must look at is attended to. But these are levels of authorization that ends up with him. So he says you may not be able to pick it up. So at this point, when there was a challenge of such picking it up, they were able to then make that person who is an administrator to take the full responsibility. Whilst the matter went into the management committee, went to him as a CFO, but they are not part of the chain of the error that happened and costed the institution. How does that happen? Because my take in any bidding process and bid management, all of the people that are part of the chain have got an obligation and a responsibility to ensure that by the time they do the approvals, all the relevant information, including what he states as certified copies. So clearly, when these certified copies were missed by the administrator, they were further missed by the project manager, as he had indicated in terms of his chain. They were further missed by the management committee. They were further missed even at his level as the CFO. That is my take, unless proven otherwise. So I'm trying to understand how did this thing came about, where in an organization there are management levels, so that you are able to ensure when something is missed at a certain level, because it seems now this administrator was the sole person with so much power that can actually lend a contract being approved whilst there are errors in that. So what kind of a system is that? Because he says now they then introduced a standard operating procedure. Does it mean that standard operating procedures were not there before? So that's why I'm saying I just do not understand, having listened to many people who come here and explain how their procurement operates, from Treasury, Department of Agriculture, and all other departments. There's a standard way of dealing with matters, and that's why you've got different levels of authorization. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, may I respond?
Chair, is it me?
Maybe if you can take our questions and then you will respond to all of us like you did the first time. It will work better that way. Okay, I'm going to take second as chair have called our names in that order. I just want to add also on what Member Nkondlo, and I also want to be really educated today because it will help us in SCOPA as we go to the annual reports. Maybe if there can be a specifics of what is it that made the human error of this administrator to be sacrificed, because when I listened, there are about 10 project managers that all that paperwork has gone. They've also looked at those paperworks, but administrator is the only one that had to go for a disciplinary. What is it that was special about this case that made only one administrator to go without the other project managers to go as those papers went through? And also the issue that was raised of the capacity within CASIDRA, that you don't have the maybe enough. I'm going to take it that is maybe enough staff component within CASIDRA. I mean, if you take responsibility in an organization, you also make your organogram to work and you make the systems to work for you. Now, if you took that responsibility and now when something goes wrong, you lean on saying that you don't have enough staff component, you don't have the luxury of doing some of the things, the worrisome. And that needs to maybe you can talk to us to say that what was different in the other financial year. I always go with the statistics of what happened in the past and what is different now that this has happened, and then there is a bit of leaning on that the staff component, maybe it doesn't talk to what you need to do within the organization. And the last one, maybe if you can tell us what is the engagement with the AG, because as we engage with the AG, always they say that they go to the department, they go to the entities to have the ongoing engagement throughout the years. How did you miss reporting the right way and that was not communicated to you in advance? Because remember, AG is not there to catch you if you did the wrong thing. It's there to add value to the different department or any entity. Now, why that was not picked up beforehand? What is the engagement? What does the engagement with you, between you and the AG entail? And the internal audit committee, why didn't pick that up also, that the reporting was not at par with what the AG is expecting from you as CASIDRA? Thank you, Chair. I think that's all of the follow-up that I have for now.
Thank you very much, Honorable Maseko. Honorable Maran.
Chair, thanks. Look, Chair, I've asked the question, and I've seen this. It seems there's different checkpoints. And I've asked basically the last point is where payment is made. And with all the necessary documents, maybe not present, or certificates that have lapsed or not certified as basically required, why the payment was made? That was my question. Because there's a last checkpoint which basically said payment can be made to a service provider. Now, Chair, I have listened carefully, and the presenter was saying allocated points to companies whose certificates have lapsed. Certificate have lapsed. So how do you make a payment when a certificate have lapsed? If you don't have, for instance, a valid tax clearance certificate, we're not supposed to make a payment. Now, in this case, there was BEE certificates not properly certified or some of lapsed, but you still proceed making that particular payment. I would like to understand how it works, because I've now heard there is, and if you see, for instance, here, some cases staff. There was staff and there was a management team that basically have to make sure that you do checks and balances. How have you made that payment? I would like to understand that. That's the one. Second one, Chair, follow-up is 43 versus 50. And the response was now that no, we have basically do 50 projects. It's just that the other 7 maybe falls under another target. I would like to understand that information. Has it been provided to the AG by saying, look, AG, you are correct. Under this target, we have only done 43, but here is the other 7. And if you have done that and provided that 7 to the AG, because you're saying you have done 50, then we see under which target those 7 have fall. I'm not sure whether that question is out of order. Where is that 7? Where does it fit in? And have that information been provided to the AG to say, there's the 43, but there's the other 7. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. Casidra?
Thanks, Chair. I'll ask the CFO to respond to Honourable Mkontlo's questions. Start with.
Thank you, Chair. In general, all the records are always made available to auditors, irrespective of whether they are internal auditors or whether they are the AG. So they make selections based on their sampling testing, and then they follow their audit procedures on that. And I don't have any problem with that, and I doubt it whether the Auditor General has had any problems in that regard. Get back to the managers. The one procurement officer, I didn't say report to other managers. There are project managers involved in the whole process. This procurement administrator must give advice and assist these project managers. I say all the documents had been collected. There's a recommendation made to management for consideration, and approval is granted. Now, when the documents are filed, from there on, it's out of the hand of management about what had been filed and how it was. Even when we do sampling testing, then we found the records are correct. It's correct and it's filed and everything is properly signed and everything. So when staff member, the SOP was needed because there was different interpretations of what can be considered as audit evidence. So that is what I said, where in some instances, a document that was originally stamped or not originally stamped was on file. Those are one of the things. The charge for the procurement administrator was negligence, and he was found guilty of that thing. The ultimate approval, like I said, remains with management. But we are also led by information that is tabled in front of us and a recommendation on that was supported by the expert in the field. So if I act on incorrect advice, that's why I said we've stepped up on a number of things. Out of the blue, a person right from the beginning, a person is trained to do his or her work. And then when the wheels are coming off, or you found out afterwards, we've put measures in place to correct that. Like the instance that we made available training to that person, and irrespective of what we've implemented, it did not work and it resulted in certain audit findings. And when the matters were picked up and identified, it was corrected, and those that was not corrected was addressed by means of the audit implications and stuff that was implemented afterwards.
Yes, Mr. Neff.
Yes, can I just continue in terms of Honourable Maseko and Honourable Marang's questions around the targets? So in terms of our AG engagement, normally after the AG has completed their process, management do engage with the AG and vice versa on the findings. So normally that happens is after the AG has completed their work. I must say during the COVID time there was limited engagement with the AG, but we normally have after our AG processes we have to start a process of engaging with the AG, and then the second one around Honourable Marang's question about the 50 and the 7, how does that work? So just to come back to the fact that we have the MOA that we sign, and when we sign the MOA, that is the one target. So the date when we sign an MOA, that becomes a target that we report in our annual report, and that target is then verified by the AG afterwards. So that's the one, and the other one is previous year projects, meaning a project that has not completed in that year. So previous year projects then is captured under this one, under dispute at the moment, where there's 50 and 43, the AG found. So in a project, when the AG then says, listen, you only had 43, not 50, that 7, the AG is actually saying, listen, you started this project actually in this year where the MOA was signed. So when the MOA is signed in that specific year, the signing date of the MOA is captured as part of our reporting. So we report on MOA signed. So otherwise we will be doing double reporting if we should report on completion and MOA signed as a target, because then that's the same project. So when a project starts in a specific financial year and complete in that year, we count the MOA signed. And in this case specifically, it's a reference to some projects that should be in the current year because of the fact that the first procurement happened in the current year. So therefore I say it's shifted to the current year and not the previous year target as was understood by Casidra. And that's just my explanation on that one. Thank you.
Before we go back to the chairperson, maybe I must just explain something else. When we do when we want work to be done, right from the beginning, when an order is written out, at that stage, we get a CSD report to make sure that the person is tax compliant and the BE certificate is in order. Now we start, that person is rendering his services and we are making payments. Every time we're making a payment, we must go back to the CSD and find out, is that person, for instance, still tax compliant? Now, what happens sometimes, if that supplier, for instance, over the month end had not submitted his pay-as-you-earn, or it's not been paid, then SARS flagged that as non-compliant. So you get sometimes that a supplier is compliant, for a few days non-compliant. During that period, you're not allowed to make a payment unless that person, with reason, or you can ascertain that that person is now tax compliant again. Those were some of the challenges and things, where if during that period the BE certificate is no longer valid, you need to go back to that client and say, please submit a new BE certificate, for instance. And that is where sometimes we don't pay attention to the date of the payment, because what's already on file can become outdated a day thereafter. And those are some of the challenges that was not properly managed.
Chairperson, I'd just like to ask, just on behalf of Honourable Moran, to my colleagues here, I think his question was there any incorrect payments made?
No.
No?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Just from clarification from my side on capacity, one of the first things I did since arriving at Casidra is consult with the team and the whole company actually about where our capacity may be short in the organization. And we've had a look at a new structure to deliver better results more safely. And we had our board approve that new organogram. So that just referring to Honourable Maseko's question, I've certainly focused on ensuring that, especially in the middle management side of the business and at the project side of the business, that we're properly capacitated and our service delivery levels can be improved. Back to you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sillington. Honorable Nkondlo.
Chair, perhaps you would advise maybe when we get to resolutions, you know, on this matter, perhaps my issues will then be dealt with at that level of resolutions. Because for me, I think I'm very worried about a situation where we have a CFO that says we were incorrectly advised, because that demonstrates a challenge in process in an organization, which can easily be manipulated, you know, or the errors outside, because now, as he indicates, these particular transactions were part of a sampling by AG, and you can imagine what many other errors exist if indeed their system at this point, you know, can rely or can even get to a point of a senior manager of the organization or a leader of the organization in finance would say we were incorrectly advised. And I take these matters, Chair, very serious in terms of finances, including how at most, if we look at governance, both of state-owned entities, both of government departments, that the country has not been taking lightly on either accounting authorities or accounting officers would shift the blame and say we were incorrectly advised. That is why you put up a system in an organization that allows, as members have already indicated, checks and balances, so that one error, when a system indeed is actually placed on one individual, others in that decision chain are placed purposely, so that you are able, because that for me is a very serious issue, which I would think also the department and the Minister of Agriculture will have to help us. How is it that they are helping CASIDRA on this particular systems matter from a procurement point of view? So that's why I'm saying maybe, and I thought, let me air my issues whilst CASIDRA is here, so that when we get to resolutions, I'm sure this is a matter that would need to get more focus on and attention on in as far as this is concerned, because I'm not sure how many outside of the ones sampled by the AG were such errors, which can then end up being said I was incorrectly advised. For me, that is actually out of order from a senior manager in a finance responsibility.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Honorable Nkondlo, Honorable Bartman, and Honorable Maran after that.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I just want to find out from CASIDRA how many people sits on the bid specification committee, how many sits on the bid evaluation committee, and how many sits on the bid adjudication committee, and who are the relevant people? And then my follow-ups will depend on those particular answers. Thank you.
Yeah, that's very short and sweet and very direct, Honorable clear. Honorable Maran.
Chair, thanks. I just wanted to check one last thing with the CFO. He was saying, for instance, that the information we're gathering at the beginning, it's put on a file to make payments based on the information that you have received initially. And it seems more payments, not more than one payment has been made. But then at some stage, for instance, that they were saying not paying attention to the dates might be that at the later stage you'll find out that a B certificate maybe have in that period have lapsed, and you have not go and check whether. Now, my question is, can it be seen as negligence? If we are saying, for instance, date have lapsed, a no new BE certificate was submitted, I have not gone back and checked the dates, can it be seen as negligence?
Thank you very much, Honorable Maran. CASIDRA?
Yes, thanks, Chair. CFO.
Chair, that was not the facts of the matter, but I'm just telling you how things from one day to another proceed and how things can change quickly. So if the Auditor General, for instance, if that payment is in his selection, the Auditor General will say on that very specific day, the paperwork were not in order. And if you look at it, you have to agree with the Auditor General, then the paperwork was not in order on that specific day. That does not, like the CEO mentioned, at no point in time the incorrect amount or supplier had been paid. To come back to the composition, we've got 7 managers here in Casidra, and not all of them are always present at a meeting. So, and specifically, if there's an appeal to be heard, we prefer that all the managers cannot be present when the transactions are approved. So even when there's appeal, it must be heard by people who were not involved in the original approval of the transaction. And we've changed that after we received a complaint and it was dealt with and we got legal advice. So therefore, it is around about at least 4 of the managers, 3 to 4 of the managers handling the approval of the transactions, so that even when there's an appeal, it can be heard separately by at least another 3 managers who were not present at that specific meeting. We normally prefer that there must be at least three managers present on the various committees, but it is always the same managers. But it can happen that today I'm forming part of the approval committee, and a week or a month thereafter, I'm the one. If I was not present when the approval had been done, I may be eligible to sit on the adjudication committee, then, for instance, or the appeal committee, based on the facts of the requirements of the day.
See, CFO, I think the question from Honorable Bartman was very direct. She asked, how many people are serving on the bid evaluation committee? How many serve on the adjudication committee? I think there was also another 3rd committee. So you...
Appeal committee.
At least 3 of the managers, Chairperson.
At least 3, not less than 3 in all the committees.
Yes.
Okay. Honorable Bartman.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the numbers. I just wanted to check, are all 3 the managers the same managers on all 3 committees? Because, and I'm pleased, I must be corrected if I'm wrong, Chair, but it is my understanding that you can be the same managers on the evaluation committee that you are on the adjudication committee in terms of the PFMA. But my understanding is the specification committee people and the rest needs to be different. But if I'm wrong, I'm open for correction, please. Yeah, thank you.
Chair,
okay, just before you respond, because I always want, if the honorable members, I want us to start. I'm not putting you under pressure. Just want us to try and round up. But I see their hands that are up. I'm not going to stop as long as their hands that are up. Let's just get Honorable Maran and Honorable Nkondlo in that order. Then Casidra can respond.
Thanks, Chair. Chair, what I pick up the response is every time is that no wrong payment were made to a wrong service provider. I'm saying, Chair, that the response that I'm hearing on my question is that my question was why payment were made if certificates were not up to date. And the response was that no wrong payment were made. And no wrong payments were made to service providers. So the correct payments were made to the correct service providers. That was not my question. My question was, for instance, if a tax clearance certificate is not in order, if a BEE certificate is not in order, they have basically lapsed, and we have failed to check the dates. Do we still proceed making that payments, or do we ask the service provider to submit updated certificates? I'm not asking whether payments were made to wrong companies whatsoever. I'm asking whether we should have proceeded with the payment made when we have not checked whether the dates of the certificates or whether certificates have lapsed. And then if we agree that we have not made those checks, can it be seen as negligence? It's just a no or a yeah answer. Thanks.
Thank you. Honorable Nkondo, the last person.
Yes, Chair. I think I wanted to latch on Honorable Batman's question because I understand that the bid committees are regulated in the PFMA. And indeed, I'm interested on the answer from the CFO when he says it can be 3 persons at a time, and by assumption, and he must correct, it means some of these members can actually be moving in between committees. And my take one of that, in the bid adjudication committee, actually, the prescript of a treasury requires the CFO to actually chair that committee. Is that the case in CASIDRA? And can CASIDRA chairperson actually provide us what is currently in their bid adjudicating in their bid committees? Who is in the 3 bid committees? That is the specification, the evaluation, and the adjudication, because I thought that would help us to understand how these committees are separated, or anyone can just attend the committees, because that is specified. And I think there's even a course with National School of Governance to help entities to ensure that we've got specific people that are separated into these committees. But when I listen to him, it is like, you do have, he calls them actually management committees. Is it the same thing? If you can just clarify there.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Maybe just before I give to CASIDRA, I see there in the presentation, there was something in one of the presentation you mentioned, there's a word, is it bid Kaizen team? Is it actually the bid adjudication committee? Is it what it is? But I think it's written bid Kaizen team. Is it also, does that name means the bid adjudication committee? So if you may respond.
Chairperson, the evaluation is done by the bid is done by the Kaizen team. They are totally independent people with knowledge, and they address those matters.
CFO, sorry, CFO, just not to interject. What is Kaizen? Is it the name of a company?
No, that is a principle, someone who developed this. So we've referred to that team in CASIDRA. They're following the Kaizen principle, so we call them internally the Kaizen team.
It's just it's an outside name given to it. It's not a company name, Chairperson. It's just after a management initiative designed by somebody somewhere in the world, and it was a very strong principle that was applied in companies. So that's why we call it that.
Thank you very much.
Because there are technical matters, we can also say that's the technical team, but we use the name Kaizen team. They are all staff members. So then, following that, those transactions are then tabled for approval or consideration. That goes to the management team. The total component of management is 7 members. But like I said, we reserve, it's always the same 7 members. But we reserve not all of them are present to do the approval. Like I said, if there's an appeal, it cannot be heard then we don't have anyone to deal with the appeals. So therefore, at least three of the managers must be at the meeting where the approvals are done. So, but that can change. It's not always the same 3 members. I'm not quite sure whether you understand me. And then if there's an appeal on a specific transaction, then that must be dealt with by the other managers who have not been at that meeting, present at that meeting. Your question about negligence, the Auditor General will report us not in terms of negligence, but according to it was not done in terms of the PFMA or in terms of CASIDRA procedures, or in terms policies and procedures, or in terms of legislation. That the Auditor General will report us like that and will not say it was negligence. So that's why that is not reported as negligence by the Auditor General.
Thank you very much. Honorable members, I see Honorable Bartman.
Chair, sorry for asking so many questions. I'm still recovering from COVID and everything, so maybe it's just me not understanding properly today. Okay. Chair, in terms of procedure, and I don't want it to be a back and forth questions, but I do need to just make sure that I understand the numbers and the procedure. Okay. When you put out a tender, there's an advertisement, there's a procurement officer, they've gone through all the details that has to be in that advertisement to suppliers, etc., etc. Okay, people sign those things off, etc., etc. Then when all of the people say we are 10 suppliers and we are all bidding for this tender or this contract, let's say the 3 people is me and Member Patmaran and Member Maseko. We are all 3 people giving in our tenders for the advertisement. Okay. Then you have your bid specification committee. Now, I don't know if CACIDRA calls that a different name. If so, they must please assist me. And the bid specification committee, if there's at least 3 people on them, okay, who are these 3 people? Is those 3 people then members Mvimbi and Nkondlo and Member America on that specification committee? So I need that detail. And then I want to know that specification committee, do they sit first? What happens? What is their role? Because I have it in front of me, but I'm not sure if I have what I think is correct and what CACIDRA is thinking is maybe they're calling it a different name and I'm just confusing myself. And then, because that specification committee is supposed to go through the specifications of the advert. Then you get to your evaluation and your adjudication committees. And to my knowledge, those on evaluation and those in adjudication are allowed to be the same people. But evaluation and adjudication and specifications aren't supposed to be the same people. And then evaluation and adjudication is supposed to check things like tax clearances, blah, blah, blah. I think the 3 top things that they check are your capability and ability of the bidder to execute the contract, the tax clearance issued by SARS, and any of the National Industrial Participation Program requirements, if any, applicable to particular contracts, and because there's a particular threshold as well. Then with your adjudication committee, you have another 3 people, and these can be the same 3 people as the evaluation committee, but usually your CFO also sits on that particular committee. And then when everything is done, it goes for someone's signature to say, okay, we have read the specification committee's report, we have read the evaluation committee's report, we've read the adjudication committee's report, we agree this tender must now go out. Then when the tender must now go on and awarded, you have to manage your contract. And in the management of your contract, you then have how payment approvals occur. Now, Chair, I know I'm going into a lot of detail. And I did indicate previously that some of my follow-up questions are dependent on the regionals. But if I can just get an indication, if you're calling it the KSM committee, that's fine. Can you just tell me, is the KSM committee the BSc, the BEC, or the BAC? Is the management committee the BSc, the BEC, or the BAC, or is it the one afterwards where it gets approved? I just need some clarity into how exactly the awarding happens, as well as afterwards exactly how the payments happen. And it's fine if they use names. They can say Deirdre Bartman is the CFO person who at this stage of the process usually does the payments. Or Member Maseko is the person who sits on the bid evaluation committee and these are their roles when they're on that. I just need a bit of clarity, please. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Bartman. CACIDRA, I know the question of Honorable Bartman was very long, but if you listen carefully to it, it's actually very clear. So, CACIDRA?
Chairperson, the Kaizen team are the people with the technical experts. That's not the executive committee management. So they do all the work, and then they make a recommendation to the management committee. That is what we then call the bid adjudication committee. What I said, there's a maximum of 7 members, but not all of them are sitting on that bid adjudication committee. So the Kaizen team, the evaluation team, is totally different from the bid adjudication committee. To keep functions separate.
Chairperson, can I make a recommendation that we answer this question in writing to yourselves so it would bring clarity?
I think that will be in order. It's probably one of the resolutions that we're actually going to take, and we might actually expand on that resolution. Now, honorable members, I know it has been a very involved and a very interesting discussion with Casidra after they have made their presentation. We've been asking questions to and fro, but obviously I think some of the questions, maybe we can take them further when we are going to take a resolution as to what other outstanding information we'd like to actually get from them. So I think we've been going on now for almost more than an hour. I think at this stage we can, if there are no further questions, we can allow Casidra, if there's anything that they would like to say, we allow them, and thereafter we can actually excuse them so that we can continue with the business of the committee. Mr. Symington, CFO, and Mr. Neft, are there anything maybe from your side would like to say before we may allow you to be excused?
From my side, Chair, no, just thank you very much to the committee for their thoughtful questions. It's always appreciated that a neutral opinion comes in and investigates how we do things. It brings clarity to the mind, and I find it useful because I'm still learning, and it's very helpful to get these questions to understand our business better. So thank you to the committee very much. Mr. Neft, I don't know.
Nothing else. Thank you, Chair and honourable members.
Thank you, members. Nothing else from my side either.
Thank you very much. Then, Casidra, you may be excused while we are going to continue with the business of the committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, there we go. Honorable members, now I think what we want to do, I think maybe before we get to the business of the day, maybe while the issues and ideas are still fresh on our mind, I think there's a suggestion that was made by Mr. Symington that some of the questions we're having would like maybe to get them in writing. Maybe we can start from there, and then we indicate what resolution we want to make in that regard. I see Honorable Bartman and I see Honorable Nkondlo.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I think Casidra is calling some of the committees different names, which is fine, but it's a bit confusing for me when I'm trying to place everything together, and I don't remember all of the particular rules in the PFMA in terms of the particular committees. But I wanted to find out if we could just get, like, not an organogram, but something that shows, okay, these are the people who deal with the specifications, these are the people who deal with the evaluation, and these are the people who deal with the adjudications committees and their respective roles, and just like a graph of some sort of how it goes from the issuing of the advert to the awarding of the contract to the managing of the contract and where the payment falls in, because I think some of my other questions and my follow-up questions are really dependent on how that particular process works. And at the moment, I'm a little bit fuzzy as to exactly how that process takes place within Casidra. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Bartman. Honorable Nkondlo. Honorable Nkondlo. Not sure if Honorable Nkondlo is muted. Honorable America.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I agree with Honorable Bartman, and perhaps a flow chart with the detail that Honorable Bartman mentioned should be contained within that sort of process flow. But what I, the discussion that ensued now was useful for clarification purposes, but we must also not forget the purpose of this particular meeting also, that there were certain audit findings that were highlighted and which we requested CACIDRA to address. They have done so. They have gone through a subsequent audit, and we don't know. We trust the credibility of the information that was provided, is that those shortcomings that were sort of highlighted in the previous audit, 2019 and 20 audit, were not have not reoccurred in the subsequent audit. That would suggest to me that the measures that have been put into place that we were briefed on met with the approval of the AG's office, not to sort of dilute the essence of the discussion that followed. I would support Honorable Bartman's quest for that clarity, and also perhaps in addition to that, link it with a flow process as to how that particular procurement occurred within CACIDRA, and also the various committees that eventually, result into the successful payment of the particular supplier. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable America. It's basically something like more of a flowchart diagram of the procurement process that CACIDRA goes through towards all its committee. I think it will help to enlighten or actually clarify most of the issues. But my slight problem I had with them, I just find them to be too much evasive on question, even if they were asked direct question, a clear question that needs a professional answer. They'll try and go around. Maybe when we get it in writing, it might be much better. Honorable Nkondlo, are you back?
Yes, no, thank you, Chair. My apologies, because I think I had connectivity issues there. I think I'm okay with the proposal, Chair, because I think that clarity needs to be sought, and that space is highly regulated. And in addition, Chairperson, to just the bid committees, I think one also is interested to get the organogram, in relation to the procurement unit of CACIDRA, because I think it's very important to understand who is who's doing what is their level of reporting as the procurement function. So that's the second one that I would be interested to understand. And then, Chair, I would like to understand that I'm not sure the extent to which we can request, because one is interested on this case of somebody that got to be dismissed and the basis thereof, because I think if we talk about negligence, because there was a question here about negligence of this person who incorrectly or ill-advised the management committee. But the same management committee, when it asks about negligence from their side, then they become evasive, because somehow, depending on how you define negligence, I think negligence must then be a term that is able, in a fair labor environment, to be ascribed, or sort of everybody must be subjected to if a particular offense in terms of their policies says this is what compose. So I'm interested to understand how this matter, if they can be able to provide that particular file on how this matter of this person who later got dismissed, how did it happen and what was, because I think the CFO speaks about the person given a final warning. I'm not sure whether there were warnings before, right up to the person getting dismissed, I think, in a month. And I'm not sure whether within that month it is because that person also had undertaken another offense. So that would have been my issues from a governance point of view that one is interested to understand. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Nkondlo. I must say I could could see the collective sympathy of the honorable members around the fact that maybe it looked like this employee was made a sacrificial lamb at the expense of senior managers. Maybe I think without getting into the nitty-gritty of the labor relation, just also a report that maybe says that, look, some kind of an explanation as to what led to the dismissal of the employee. Thank you very much. I see Honorable America.
Thank you, Chair. I don't want to add to what you suggested. I initially wanted to mention that perhaps we can request a copy of the arbitration award. I mean, that will sort of that will give us a
going now.
process that happened.
Yeah, no, I see it's a question of I see you seem all to be very sympathetic about the question of the small fishes get caught while the big fishes get away, so that might actually help. I think the procedural officer will know how to kind of paraphrase that when we are actually doing that as a request to them. Procedural officer, I think you've got the gist really of what the honorable members are requesting. Honorable Mr. David. I see Mrs. Klute.
Good morning, Chairperson. Yes, we'll capture the recommendations. Okay. I think Dustin will have it all jotted down. Okay.
Now, the next issue will be I think it will be the minutes on the agenda that was circulated. Maybe if you can fly that and deal with that. Yes, I see the attendance, yes.
Can I be excused?
Yes, Honorable Maran. Thank you very much for gracing us with your presence.
Well, thanks to you, Chairperson, and all the other members. Have a nice day. Also to the officials. Thanks.
Thank you. The welcoming and the number 3 was the briefing by the Department of the Premier. Number 4 was by Casidra. Number 5 was the consideration and appropriation of the draft committee report, matter arising. I think we can go up. There you go, the attendance to APEC. Then there was the resolutions. Can I have a proposer for the adoption of the minutes?
I propose that we adopt, Chair.
Honorable America, thank you very much. Honorable Maseko seconded. Thank you. Thank you very much, Honorable Maseko. Think then don't think there is another item. I think just for information of Mr. David.
Hi, Chairperson, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, yes, Chairperson. It's just maybe if you can provide feedback on the APEC, Chair, for the members.
Yes, honorable members, as you might have seen that on the previous resolution, we identify members who will attend the APEC. There was a possibility that it might actually be postponed because they were still waiting for an outstanding report from the about the migration of APEC from the office of the, I think, of the Auditor General to the office of the Speaker. So they were just waiting for the finalization of that report. So the AGM might not be held at the time that it was indicated, but as soon as that information has been received, I will ask the procedural officer to actually send it to the members and also into the group. That was just for information, honorable members. Now, if there are no further issues, honorable members, let me make use of this opportunity to thank you very much for attending, and also to the staff members that are always available and helpful. Thank you very much. The meeting is closed.
Thank you, Chair. Have a lovely weekend, colleagues.
Thank you.